Welcome, hope you're doing well. My name is Nago Daniel, and this is the third episode of the series that we're doing on Taoism. Now, in the last episode, we talked about the Tao, of which nothing can be really said, so that was interesting. You see, one of the basic ideas of this book, the Tao Te Ching, one of the basic books of Taoism, and it's basically the basic whatever that there is that cannot be defined. So that was interesting. In this video, we'll be talking about the second main principle of Taoism, and that of mutual arising. And we'll also be talking about the symbolism behind the yin and yang. What's up with all of that? You see, that's also a very recurring symbol in Taoism. Also another book, the I Ching, that the Tao Te Ching is based on, I think, or the Taoism, I'm not sure. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And why should you listen to me? Well, you don't really have to listen to me, you see. I just like reading about Taoism and topics like these and sharing it with others. And I find it very interesting, and I think that you'll also probably find it very interesting. And maybe you can learn something new. So you see, this idea of mutual arising is a very important idea to Taoism, and also it's also found in Buddhism and also a lot of other religions and philosophies. You will probably also find this idea almost everywhere, because it's one of these basic ideas. It's like 1, 2, 3 or ABC. And this idea is that you can't have something without nothing. And you can't have nothing without something. That is the simplest way that you can put this whole idea that we've been talking about in this video. The total inseparability of things. The play of the opposites. You see, the second chapter of this book, the Tao Te Ching, which, as we said in previous episodes, is one of the basic books to Taoism. The second chapter of it starts out like this. It says that when people see things as beautiful, ugliness is created. When people see things as good, evil is created. Being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short define each other. High and low oppose each other. Fore and aft follow each other. And I'll leave the rest if you want to read it. And by the way, yet again, look at how cool this book is with all its drawings and all of that. Very cool, very cool. It's very interesting style. These Chinese, very vague, but yet at the same time, I'm not sure how to explain it. It's very interesting. Cool book, cool book. Now back to the topic. As it said in the book, when people see things as good, evil is created. Being and non-being produce each other. Now do you see how you can't have up without down? Or inside without outside? Or the idea of short without the idea of a long? Or flowers without bees? They are inseparable. They go together. And it's not like they were first short things and then long things. Or first long things and then short things. They go together. They exist in pairs. And just in the same way, you don't first have a world with flowers and no bees. Or first bees with no flowers. They exist with each other. They need each other. They are one organism. Yes, they look different, but they are inseparable. Just in the same way, how your head looks different from your feet. But of course, you can't have a human with just the head and without feet, or without feet and just the head. They go together. They are inseparable. They are one organism. And flowers and bees, they are also just one organism. I mean, yes, of course, it's much easier to see that that the head and the feet are inseparable, because they are connected with all sorts of veins and wires and all sorts of that. But the bee and the flower, they are also connected in a much more subtler way, of course, but they are. Yes, they are apart. The bees go around flying all over the place, but they are connected with all sorts of, the subtle currents in the air, with the scents that the flowers are sending out and all of that, and probably much more that we're not even aware of. They are connected because, you see, they are one organism, because they need each other, because they are inseparable, because if one goes, the other one also goes. This is the idea of mutual arising. They come together, they come into being together. You can't have one without the other. You see, explicitly, they are in opposition, but implicitly, there's a hidden unity behind them. In other words, they seem to be as different can be, but they go together. They are inseparable from one another. And this means that all of the things are without an independent reality, that they cannot be detached from reality, and that everything only exists in relationship with everything else. Pain with pleasure, sound with silence, something with nothing, solid with space. Yes, they seem to be different, but in reality they are one. There's a hidden unity behind it. That they are two aspects of the same reality. The same thing is true for is and isn't, being and non-being. They can't exist without one another, they go together. But you see, this is contrary to our common sense. And now two of these polarities come out of is and isn't. And one is solid and space, and other one is life and death. First, let's talk about solid and space. You see, we think that being is really there and non-being is not. You see, but at the same time, we're afraid that being might end up as non-being. Because it seems to be that there's much more non-being than being. In other words, that there's much more space than solid. And because everything that's an object, everything that's solid requires energy, and the energy eventually runs out, we're afraid that eventually all of this might end up as nothing, and that we might end up as nothing. But you see, what we don't see is that space and solid, or emptiness and solid, they go together. They don't exist without one another. I mean, what is space other than the relationship of solids? And what is solids? What is objects if it's not the relationship of the space between them? You can't have one without the other. I mean, imagine if you didn't have space. How could you differentiate different objects if you didn't have space between them? And how would you know that there is space out there if you didn't have objects in space? You can't have one without the other. I mean, every artist knows this. Every architect knows this. The importance of space, the importance of emptiness. But you see, if we don't see this, we identify reality with the solid, with the energy, and non-reality with emptiness. And we think that one might eat up the other and that it will all be nothing. But we don't see that they are two aspects of the same reality, that they go together. Now, what about life and death? You see, I think that the idea that most people are scared of is that when we die, there will be just nothing forever. Just absolute nothingness. That we will be swallowed up by death, and that will be that. Curtains forever, the universe stops. It's like going to sleep and never waking up. Absolute nothingness. But you see, there's nothing to be afraid of. I mean, are you afraid of that? Will you be afraid of that? Nothingness forever? Who will be afraid? There will be no one to be afraid. There will be no one to experience that fear. You see, if there's just absolutely nothing, there's also no one to experience it. But you see, of course, you can't have nothing without something. And just in the same way, you can't have something without nothing. They go together. They are two aspects of the same reality. And you see, it's just the same with life and death. The fact that there is life implies that there is death. Of course, everyone knows this. I mean, the moment that you were born, it's like you were thrown off of the edge of a cliff. And you're falling. There's nothing that you can do. Everything is falling apart and that you're going to die. Everyone knows this. But you see, the fact that there is death implies that there will be life. Death is life and life is death. That implies life. Because you see, they go together. They cannot be separated from one another. You see, I wrote this down, that the life of any creature can be separated from their death in only a conventional way. I mean, I read this from this book, The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. It kind of blew my mind that the life of you, the life that you have, can only be separated in a conventional way from your death. Just in the same way that our head is separated from our neck in a conventional way. In reality, they go together, they are one organism. I mean, and we also separate it in an abstract way. I mean, where does my neck stop and head begin? I mean, where is that line? It's very arbitrary. And we separate it only in a conventional way. And we separate life and death only also in a conventional way. In reality, they are two aspects of the same reality. Because you see, being is really being and non-being, being and non-being, being and non-being. Because they go together. You can't have one without the other. Just in the same way how sound in reality is sound silence, sound silence, sound silence. Because if it was always sound, there wouldn't be sound. There has to be silence for sound to be heard. You see, it's just waves. All of this is just waves. Life and death, all of this, up and down. Sound, silence. And sound is actually just vibrations. And you see, all of our senses are vibrations if you think about it. All of our senses are one sense. You see, we touch light with our eyes. It's the most subtle kind of touching that we have. We touch the vibrations in the air with our eardrums. We touch the food with our tongues. We touch the gases with our noses. And of course, the epidermis with our epidermis is the crudest form of touch. But it's all just touch. It's all just a vibration. Is it on or off? Touching or not touching? And all vibration is a wave. It goes up and down just like a wave. And now, of course, you can't have a half wave. You can't have, just the crust of a wave without the trough of a wave. They go together. Just in the same way, sound and silence, they go together. You need one to have the other. So then sound is really sound, silence, sound, sound. They alternate. Everything is like, all of our senses they go like that. In just the same way. It's just the same with life and death. It's being non-being. But you see, if they go too fast, if vibrations go too fast, we don't realize the off principle. We only realize the on poles. I mean, you see, perfect example of this is that why people don't use certain kind of lights where there's a saw in the room. What was it light called? An arc light, something like that. Because the vibration of the light can synchronize with the speed of the saw that's going. And if it synchronizes, it will appear like the saw is not moving at all. I mean, if I can find a video of it like that, I will put it up here in the screen. But you see, if it's going too fast, we don't realize it. We don't realize that there's there. We also don't realize most of the time that there's also silence in sound when we're listening to music. We just notice most of the time we notice the on principle. But you see, when the vibrations are really slow and really far apart, like day and night or life and death, like we really separate them from one another. And we don't realize that they are really the same thing, the two aspects of the same reality. And that, yes, explicitly, they look different, they're in opposition. But implicitly, there's the unity behind them. So you see, in reality, that is life. It's the most life-giving thing that there is. And of course, it's also true the other way. That life is that. As we said, everything is falling apart. Life is always falling apart. It's always changing. You see, to be or not to be is not the question. Because to be cannot be without non-being. Just as non-being cannot be without being. Say that 3 times in a row. So you see, your death doesn't mean the end of consciousness. After you die, myriads of other conscious beings will be born. And you see, it's like this. You see, the fact that you're alive implies that you're going to die. But you see, when you die, the fact that you're dead, the death implies that you're going to be alive. It's like, you see, that is like a bounce back. You bounce back from it, and consciousness continues. Now, of course, you won't remember anything, because the continuity of who you are depends on your memory. And of course, when all of your memory goes with that, you might as well be someone else. So another conscious being who was born. Just in the same way, you don't remember who you were before. When you try to remember past, to your oldest memories, you're faced with nothingness. Out of nothingness, you came. Yet you're alive. See, out of this nothingness, you're alive. And you're going back to that same nothingness. And you see, an interesting thing is that just as to our eyes, to our sense of vision, our head seems like it's just nothing. When I move my hands behind my eyes, they just disappear. There's just nothing there. It's just absolutely blank. But yet still, out of that nothingness, I see, and out of that nothingness, I have, intelligence, and I can see and I'm aware. Just in the same way, there's this frisky nothingness behind our whole being. When thinking to our earliest memories and when thinking to the future, we're met with this nothingness. But yet out of this nothingness, We're alive, we're conscious, we're here. I mean, isn't that interesting? I mean, you see, this is how the universe keeps things interesting. You see, it's aware of itself. It looks at itself from all sorts of different angles, from everywhere. And then it forgets it all. It forgets that it did all of that and starts again, so that it won't become boring. I mean, if you're interested about more of this stuff that I was talking about, going to sleep and never waking up, all of that stuff, I made a video. It's a pretty old. I mean, not that old, but it's a pretty old video. It's titled something like "Going to Sleep and Never Waking Up," so you can check it out if you want to. Now, what we got to realize is that there's nothing that you could do to hold on to yourself and be secure. Any minute you could die. Any minute a piano could fall on your head, or you could sleep on a banana peel. The life is always falling apart. Everything is falling apart. But you see, once we accept this, once we accept the fact that we're all disintegrating, and we go with it, we flow with it, we come alive. We gain this energy because we're not locked up thinking about what will happen next. We can take risks, we have courage, because we're not defending ourselves all of the time. You see, this falling apart of everything is what makes it alive. You see, life is something that is always falling apart. You see, change is life. This is the Tao. You see, to flow with the Tao, to not resist it, to not go against it. This is the topic of the next video, the art of Wu Wei. Go with it. So then let's get back to what we were talking about. You see, for Chinese thought, these two aspects of the world are called the Yang and the Yin. And you see, they mean these words. I think the Yang, I mean, might switch up the words, but the Yang means the south side of the mountain, or the shade, or the sunny side. And the Yin means the north side of the mountain, or the shady side. And they come to mean black and white, positive and negative, and male and female. And the secret is that they are inseparable, as we said so many times before. And you see, the inner connection, or the inseparability of the Yin and the Yang is what meant by the Tao. You see, that's why it can be explained. That's another way of putting it. Because you see, all thinking is classification. It's asking the question, is you is or is you ain't? Is it this or is it that? Is it black or white? And of course, if you want to say that something is inside, you also have to have an outside. And now another one of these polarities that is not so obvious, but it's very interesting, is you as self and the world as other. You see, of course, you don't know what you mean or experience or sense as yourself unless you have something that's not you, unless you have something that's other, unless you have something to contrast it to. And of course, you don't know what you mean by other unless you know what you mean by self. So you see, this means that self and other, the world and you, they go together. They really are one thing. As we said explicitly, there seems to be a difference. Although that's me and it's the world. But you can't have one without the other. You can't have self without other. They really are one because they are inseparable. Just as with bees and flowers. And we also talked about this in the first episode when we were talking about the conventional characters of roles. And we mentioned the conventional character of the ego. And if you want to learn more about this, I leave a link in the description to the first episode where you can find it in the playlist. You see, of course, if we didn't have these oppositions, if we didn't have this opposition between self and other, life and death, known, unknown, conscious, unconscious, then nothing would happen. Absolutely nothing would happen. And things would be boring. You see, we wouldn't be able to surprise ourselves. Everything would be under control and things would be absolutely boring. That's really the spice of life. It's variety, of course, but also that you don't know what's going to happen next. That there's a surprise element to it. But if there's no opposition, it would be just boring. We wouldn't want to play it. Just in the same way, if you already know in a chess game who's going to win, you stop playing the game, it becomes boring. When you know who's going to win in the game of cards, you don't play the rest of the game if you already know who's going to win and lose. You shuffle the deck and play again. Now, we mentioned in the beginning of the video that this idea also exists in Buddhist thought. And I'm reading it about right now in this book, The Way of the Zen by Alan Watts. It's very interesting. It says that this kind of relativity, this kind of relationship, like up and down, also exists between Samsara and Nirvana. And now what these mean? Well, Samsara is the cycle of life and death. But it doesn't have to be taken literally. Like some people do and think of it as you actually like being reborn in different lives and your karma going on and all of that stuff. But there's also a metaphoric meaning to that. That the process of rebirth is taking place at every moment, to the extent that man identifies himself with a continuous ego, and this ego reincarnates himself at every moment. Basically, that you identify yourself with who you were in your past, and then your ego is being reborn, something like that. That's like the metaphoric meaning of it. So you see, this doctrine is not about accepting some kind of theory on what will happen after we die, or some kind of theory of rebirth. But its importance lies in exemplifying the problem of vicious cycles, like trying to control everything around you, which is samsara, or grasping onto life, or clinging onto life, or something like that. I'm not sure about this. You don't take what I'm saying like just take it with a pinch of salt. I'm still not sure about all of this stuff. Now, what about nirvana? You see, nirvana is the state in which the attempt to grasp life and grasp onto reality has ceased by realizing the impossibility of this grasping. You see, not even grasping onto nirvana as something to be attained. Now, it's basically, as most people know, it is the end of samsara, it's end of the cycle. Well, instead of me talking about this and maybe saying a bunch of bullshit, I just let Alan Watts explain it. So I read some quotes from the book. So this is what Alan Watts says about nirvana. In this first quote, it says that if nirvana is expiration, it means that if its translation is expiration, if it means that. If nirvana is expiration, then it is the act of someone who has understood the futility of trying to hold one's breath or life indefinitely. Because to hold one's breath is actually to lose it. Thus, nirvana is equivalent to the goal of moksha, relief or liberation from a certain point of view. It seems to be despair, the recognition that life escapes all our efforts to control it, that all human endeavors are but the attempts of a perishing hand to grasp at the clouds. Seen from the other direction, this despair turns into joy and creative power, according to the principle that to lose one's life is to find it, to find the freedom of action unfettered by self-frustration and the anxiety inherent in trying to save and control the self. And now here's another quote about nirvana. Nirvana is the kind of life that arises when clinging to life ceases. Insofar as any definition is clinging, nirvana is necessarily indefinable. It is the natural, non-self-perceived state of mind, and here, of course, mind has no specific meaning, because what is not perceived is not known in the conventional sense of knowledge. And now, I'm not sure if these translations are 100% correct, because I just took it, translated it from Romanian, because this book is in Romanian, and translated it with DeepL to English, so I hope that the translation is good. And now, as I read that this relativity also exists between samsara and nirvana, that the search for nirvana implies the problem of samsara. And then, of course, this is also true the other way around, that what seems to be samsara is actually nirvana. From this comes the famous saying that the void is form and the form is void. Or you can also say that the void implies form and the form implies void. Or as we said, you can't have something without nothing or nothing without something. Now I won't really get into this because this is also a deep topic and I barely know anything about it. So, but another interesting thing that derives from this is that there's nothing that you can do to attain nirvana because you already have it. You are already there. Like, you have it. There's nothing to do. And now people then try to actually do nothing, but it's like trying to find something that you've never lost. So it's saying that everything that you do, it's natural. You're already there. Like, you already enlightened. You already got nirvana, or however you want to say it. You're there. There's nothing to do. But this is a deep topic. I'm not sure. I don't want to say anything stupid, but it's very interesting that there's nothing to do. Okay, well then what's the point of all of this if there's nothing to do? You see, well maybe you just do it for the fun of it. You see, I mean that's the only reason I see. I mean, why meditate if you're already there? I mean, maybe you just do it. Why not? Because it's fun. Maybe something like that. So it's very interesting, a lot of very interesting stuff. So then this was the idea of mutual arising, that you can't have something without nothing. And if you like this video and would like to see more, you can subscribe. It will mean a lot to me, and it also encourages me to do more videos like this. So like, subscribe, all of that stuff, you already know it. So thank you for watching. If you're interested, I took a lot of the stuff that I was talking about from the book The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, and some other podcasts or lectures by Alan Watts that you can find on YouTube. You find the link to the other episodes in the descriptions. You find the whole playlist there, so if you want to watch the other episodes of this series, you can watch them. So thank you for being here, thank you for watching this video. Have a great day and goodbye.